All be set up. So good morning and thanks to everybody for joining us today. Really nice to see people here today. My name is Beth Tapster. I'm a corporate support librarian in the Library and Information Service at Leeds Teaching Hospitals. And along with my colleague Jenny Emmel, who's also here, I'd like to give you all a warm welcome to this session of Talking Points. For anyone who's not attended Talking Points before, this is a fairly regular programme of quite informal events which are hosted by the library team and aim to offer an opportunity for any team or individual in the Trust to share their work and achievements and projects with a wider audience. And the aim of that is really just to encourage knowledge sharing, discussion and connections across Leeds Teaching Hospitals. So one of the focuses for the Talking Point programme is to highlight the work of some of the non-clinical teams in the Trust that perhaps we might be aware of, but maybe not have a good understanding of what they do and how much they really contribute to our patients and our staff. And today's session is an opportunity to learn more about a team that's been a really integral part of the hospital community for many years, but whose work a lot of us, especially those of us perhaps who don't identify as religious or with faith, might not be fully aware of or fully understand. We're delighted to be joined today by three of our colleagues from the Chaplaincy service. That's Sonia Casivante, Ben Rhodes and Gurdev Dehil, who've kindly volunteered to take the time to chat with us about what their roles involve and the varied and important work that the service does in the Trust. So we're going to have time for questions and discussion after we've heard from our colleagues. So please do feel free to pop questions into the chat box as we go along or to ask them at the end of the session. And again, thanks so much for being here today. And I'm now going to hand over to Sonia without any further ado so we can hear from her. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Beth. And thank you for inviting us. And thank you all for being here and giving us your precious time and your ear. As Beth said, I'm here together with Gurdev and Ben. And it's a little bit of a sadness that we can't represent here even the more diverse nature of our team. For we are working towards reflecting that great diversity that's reflected within the NHS. The core of what we offer is pastoral, spiritual, and religious care for patients, their families, and for staff. But of course, we also contribute to the wider work of the LTHT, and through our presence and participation in various meetings and fora, and also within training of staff. My own part of the presentation today is to give a flavor of what we do through an account of a day in the life of a chaplain, that kind of style. Gurdev will speak after I do with his perspective of what he does, and then Ben will round up with a broader picture of what chaplaincy is about. I have a background myself in the Church of England and in the Worldwide Anglican Communion, but it's very important for me to say, for us to say, that we're here for everyone, irrespective of faith or belief. So today I've chosen to read directly from my journal, and this was an entry made a couple of months ago, and it really is as it happened. So this was a couple of months ago, and it was the last day before I went on annual leave. So here goes. Midnight finds me driving back home from the LGI, where I'd been called out to L6, withdrawal of care. The patient seen twice previously. During the last visit, a few days previously, patient had engaged well, so this call was a shock. 2 daughters and son-in-law present, so they and patient still on my mind as I drove back home after the call and go through the rituals of changing and cleansing before making myself a cup of tea and settling into bed again. Takes a while to go back to sleep. Body clock ensures that I'm awake at a good time in the morning, no alarm necessary. Begin with morning prayer, then breakfast, shower, get dressed. Today, my first task is to take the funeral of a baby lost at 17 weeks. The funeral is at Cottingley Creme. I take a look at what I had printed the previous evening. I fold and staple 2 copies for the grieving parents. The service is at 9:15 a.m. and I'm out of the house by 8 a.m. The journey should take no more than 20 minutes, but I take no chances with traffic and road conditions. I arrive by 8:30, but I'm glad of the space to take a final look at the service. I decide to add a prayer. At 8:55 a.m., I leave the car and head to the vestry to don robes. I enter the chapel to offer a prayer before moving to the entrance. I'm the first there and enjoy a few minutes of quiet in the bright autumn sunshine. The parents arrive. We talk for a few minutes. Mom begins to cry. They move to sit in the chapel. A member of the Creme staff arrives, and we talk about the weather and books and the marvels of the human body. The undertaker arrives with the baby in a tiny white box. She goes to speak with parents. Then we enter to Songbird by Fleetwood Mac. The parents had requested 3 poems: Footprints in the Sand, Butterflies, and If Ever. Mom cries and cries throughout the service. Dad seems composed, comforting Mom. This should have been their 3rd child. Others are 5 and 2 years old. It's Thursday morning, and on Thursday mornings, I'm usually at Chapel Allerton Hospital, so I head there after the funeral. I'm there by 10:15 a.m. I need a cup of coffee before I go onto the wards. I have one as I switch on the computer to check for messages and prepare the visiting list. I ring a contact number of the friend listed as next of kin for the gentleman whose funeral I will be conducting the day after my return from annual leave. No answer. I have tried a number of times before and will have to try again. There is 1 card to deliver for a new patient and visits to 2 long-term patients. I arrive on C3 to deliver the card for staff to pass on, but they are keen for me to see the patient, so I don PPE and visit. Patient keen to share burdens around complex family care and the need to care for self. I'm asked to get in touch with her vicar. I listen, offer prayer card holding cross, and say prayers including the Lord's Prayer, in which the patient joins in. Assured her of continued support and prayers. I thank staff and wish them well as I leave C3. I descend to the lower level, and as I enter the corridor to C1 and C2, Sister Sarah meets me. Oh, Sonia, we're just talking about you. May I introduce you to a new member of staff who's asking about the nearest Anglican church? Sister Sarah is rushing to a meeting herself, so points me in the direction where the new staff member went. I locate her after a few minutes, and we have a conversation and exchange contact details. I continue to C1. Patient is away from bed space for physio. I move across to C2. Patient is not at bed space. I find her upstairs in the lobby with her husband. She's being discharged tomorrow. I've been seeing her for over a period of several months between 3 hospitals. We've had some good and long conversations, sometimes a full hour. I return to the office to update the database for the 2 patients seen. Go back to C1. Patient has returned and we have a good conversation. As usual, I offer prayer to finish. As I say farewell, the patient begins to cry. I stay until the patient feels calmer. Back in the office, I updated the database and tried to call the friend of the deceased again. Still no reply. As I begin to tidy up to leave, the head of the CSU puts her head around the door. We have a conversation. After she's left, I too leave, heading back to check in with my colleague at Jimmy's. I'm rostered to be at the LGI this afternoon, but my colleague is having to take a baby funeral herself this afternoon. And on balance, it seems that I'm better placed at Jimmy's, where the patient list is longer and where we have a higher number of urgent calls coming through to us. So change of plan. I stay at Jimmy's. I grab some lunch. Our Hindu chaplain is running events today in the chapel and asks for support. So we gather and take some photos, suitably socially distanced. I opt to be the photographer rather than the photographed. I'm camera shy. 2 emails to send. To the new member of staff spoken to early with information promised, and to the vicar of the patient on C3. Need to try and remember how to set up automatic replies on my email. Recruit the help of the Hindu chaplain. Between us, we work it out. Getting close to the end of the day and the patient to see who is COVID positive. I finished the day in the hot office. Still haven't been able to get hold of the friend of the deceased. Will have to try on my return from leave. This obviously doesn't cover every single thing we do, but gives a good flavor of what a day might look like sometimes. So I'll leave that with you and hand over to Gurdev.
I think you're muted at the moment, Gurdev. I don't know if we can unmute. Should just be at the top of the screen. There we are.
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
All right, that's good. So sorry, apologies for my computer has been playing up, and I luckily my son was at home. He also works for NHS in the admin side, and so he said you can use my computer. So I'm using his computer. Yeah, my role within the chaplaincy services, I'm a spiritual care volunteer looking after the Sikh members of the Sikh community. Well, sometimes I do have to see other members as well, like Punjabi speaking Muslim patients I've seen. I've seen some Hindu patients as well. My role is to visit patients once a week. Normally it's a couple of hours, but I do spend more than 2 hours when I go in there, because I find that some of the patients do want to talk, do want to tell me about their family, etc. So I just listen. So that's one of the very important things for spiritual care volunteers, that we do listen to the patients, what they have to say. I talk about very general matters. I don't go into family affairs or his problems unless they want to talk themselves. And if they want to, yes, I do sort of respond to that, but all in confidentiality. I haven't been to the hospital now due to the pandemic for nearly a couple of years, but I still have been working with the chaplaincy service, because I keep getting telephone calls from either from the chaplaincy office or from the direct from the wards where doctors have rung for patients who have either come to end of life and they want some come and talk to them or talk to the family. During the pandemic, what I came to learn that because very few people could go into the hospital, it was mostly the children who went to the hospital, and they would immediately ask the sisters or doctors that they want a chaplain because they don't know what to do next in case of end of life. And I would get a call. I'll speak to the children, and they say, "Oh, our loved one is going now." Then I explain to them about what our religion says about life. That life is granted by the Lord, and He gives us the number of breaths we have to take in this world, and when they are completed, one has to go. Then we have to leave them. We can't hold on to them. And they do accept that. And I normally say a hymn from our Guru Granth Sahib, our Sikh spirituals, scriptures, and which really puts them at peace, at the family itself. I have, like Sonia, I have to help the families arrange with funerals as well, and liaise with funeral directors, and liaise with the family, and liaise with the gurdwaras, because we have a final prayer which has to be done within 10 days with the gurdwara itself. In one of the incidents, like Sonia, there was a stillborn baby, and I had a call. The family wanted to speak to the chaplain, and I had to arrange for the funeral was arranged by the hospital, and I had to get the family together because they didn't want to speak to anybody else, obviously, their private matter. And I had to arrange with a Sikh priest and go to the crematorium, help them with their funeral service. So these are sort of part of the things which volunteers, I wouldn't say expected to do, but I have come across where I have done this so many times. And now the community, so often deaths in due to COVID, they have been ringing me directly. They have come to know that I can help them with the funeral arrangements, and now I get some extra work as well to make arrangements for their funerals as well. I also promote Leeds chaplaincy services within the community by speaking at our Sikh temple, speaking on the Akash radio, which is a Punjabi radio for the community. Often we talk about what the chaplaincy service is and how they can use this service as well. So that's mostly I do, but if there are any questions, I would try to answer them as well. Thank you for listening. Yeah.
If I just follow Gurdev and Sonia, so I'm Ben. I'm head of chaplaincy and spiritual care services for Leeds Teaching Hospitals. It's really good to hear the sort of lived experiences of Gurdev and Sonia. I want to just talk a little bit about history in the sense of where we're going as a service and the changes within the UK, and also a little bit about the mystical world of pastoral, spiritual and religious care, just in terms of how we can collaborate and how we can do our best for patients and colleagues. So in the UK, healthcare chaplaincy goes right back to the early monastic foundations. I used to be a chaplain at Bart's in the City of London, and it's one of the two oldest hospitals in the UK. And very much before the advent of many medical advances, chaplaincy was very much around in a very Christian model about preparing the soul for its a journey to eternity and beyond. So a lot of religious rituals and rites. Bart's Hospital had a number of little chapels kind of around the hospital grounds. You then go through the evolution of UK and English society, and you have things like the Poor Laws and through the Elizabethan settlement, and you have chaplains to organise poorhouses and organisations. And then you have pre-NHS a mixture of private and municipal hospitals, and quite often they would have chaplains, and that's certainly true here in Leeds. Kind of fast forward to the beginning of the NHS, 1948. And interestingly, my predecessor, Chris Swift, who's written quite a lot around the history of spiritual care in Leeds, talked about the notebook of the chaplain the night before the NHS came into being, and rather radically for the day, but it just shows also how far we've come. He wrote in his notebook that he wondered whether the chapel at St James's should be sort of divided off into a Roman Catholic section, a Free Church section, and a Church of England section to meet the diversity. That didn't happen, and that's probably good that it didn't. But it just shows the beginning of kind of diversity. Quite often at the inception of the NHS, and there were 30 whole-time chaplains at the beginning of the NHS and a lot of part-time chaplains. Chaplaincy has been part of the holistic care that's been delivered to patients. Quite often in the early days, it was on a parish church model. So it was very much like parish priests visiting, and colleagues. I've been ordained since 1997, and some of the older priests when I was ordained could remember even going to the local hospitals in southeast London, and they would have little pigeonholes where the names of people from their parishes would be, and they would visit normally on a Tuesday, parish visiting day. But gradually, as the NHS was established and came into being, there were a number of different kind of needs became apparent, and models needed to change. And you've got a group of chaplains in the 60s that actually realised that it's much more than importing a parish model, and a model that needed to put the patient's needs at the centre of everything that was done. So chaplaincy had continued to grow and develop, and there's a dialogue, because counselling comes from pastoral care, which got its early origin in kind of Christian practice and other traditions. But there's been a dialogue, and we're definitely not counsellors, although a lot of us have got counselling training. We're there to provide spiritual, pastoral and religious care. But this dialogue and a modern way of chaplaincy that covers mental health, covers acute health and community, and now GP. In the relatively late, I'm afraid, we came to ecumenical, so cross-Christian working. And then there's been quite an exponential move. So in 2000 was the first sort of document on multi-faith chaplaincy, recognising the important place of the other world faiths in the in delivering care. And then more recently, we're a service that covers faith and belief, recognising that many people's beliefs are not religious, but underpin people's lives just as much as religious beliefs might have. So one of the things that I'm very pleased to say, alongside Gurdev, Haridas and other colleagues, is that we have a non-religious pastoral carer, Paula. Paula's been a member of staff in the Trust for many years and has a special role for staff support, which focuses our offer of being there for staff colleagues, and particularly after the pandemic. So we've had a change. And this is reflected in the guidance. So NHS England is just going out again to consult, and one of the things that you very much could do from your own professions and your own backgrounds within the NHS, when the work starts, I definitely encourage you to be part of that consultation, to shape things both from your personal experience and your professional experience, because it's really important that we deliver service to meet the needs of patients and staff as they are, rather than being bound in the past. The vision for the future is very much a diverse one where I think through the ICS, the integrated care system, we will look at perhaps pooling resources so that we can make sure that most beliefs and faiths do have a vibrant and professional chaplaincy, spiritual care or pastoral care provision. But we're very much where we want to diversify, and also bringing in different models. So the model being in England has been a strongly Christian Western model that's been in dialogue with the biomedical model here, but there are very noble traditions. I think about Ayurvedic traditions within Hinduism and South Asia. You have I was privileged before, sadly, the war in Syria, to go to one of the first, as we would describe, mental health hospitals. So there are many different belief systems that have models that are around holistic care, body, mind, and spirit, in the sense of religious or non-religious beliefs. Just going to quickly talk about this service that we deliver around pastoral, spiritual and religious care, and then finally just make some comments about language and the way that things are changing. And then definitely, if you have any questions or reflections, very happy, Gurdev, Sonia and myself, very happy to dialogue with you. So the three things that we're charged to do is deliver appropriate pastoral, spiritual and religious care. All of our care is done by consent, as for any other medical procedure or anything that we do in healthcare. We are there to offer support when it's wanted. We're not there to impose. The beauty about working in pastoral, spiritual, religious care in the NHS is we've got nothing to sell. So as Gurdev said and Sonia said, we will pray. We will offer a view if people ask us, but our first call is actually that human-to-human meeting. And that's the heart of pastoral care, about that empathetic listening ear. The beauty about pastoral care is we're not there to fix anything. We're there to listen. We're there to walk alongside. We're there to accompany people. We haven't got a fixed agenda. The agenda is the person or the people that we're walking alongside. Spiritual care, very briefly, can be seen as care that gives is related to things that give shape and meaning to people's lives, which may or may not be in reference to a transcendent or a God. So they're the questions that we struggle with as human beings about what it means to be human, to be in relationship, what it means to love, what it means to be ill, what it means to be well, what happens when we die, is there an afterlife, how should I shape my life? Religious care is normally around a world religion, and quite often it'll be around a world religion will have its holy books, its teachings, its rites and rituals that answer those big questions that we, on a spiritual level, struggle with, both joyously and frustratingly. It's all that make us human. But it is about very much the three models of care. It's about offering those when appropriate and kind of when asked and invited. And as Sonia's saying, we do that 24 hours a day. We're part of the major incident response. We're there since COVID. We average quite often sort of 3 episodes of urgent care a day across the trust, across the different faith or belief. And Sonia and Gurdev have been essential to that. So looking to the future, a number of things that I see. So one of the things is that the language is changing. So we're just looking at having a new service leaflet, and we're probably going to have 2 leaflets because the language to describe things is changing so quickly. And what is helpful and inclusive to one person is perhaps not for another. So we definitely use pastoral, spiritual and religious in or chaplaincy as kind of appropriate. And quite often for a younger demographic, the language of values, we're a value-led organisation, but there was an amazing lecture, Cadbury lectures done at the University of Birmingham by Professor Linda Woodhead, and she talked about the impact of the fundamental British values and values in education to shape how people navigate life and the things that are important to them. Also, the whole tricky thing about value clash when our values are perhaps say very different things, or we make different claims. So there are different languages to describe this area of things that give shape and meaning, sort of kind of give value in our lives. One of the things for us after COVID is being very aware of the impact of faith or belief on people's outcome, and this has been very painfully aware through COVID. So we know that in the city, many people from some of the world faiths have been disproportionately impacted. So we know that our Jewish brothers and sisters, our Sikh brothers and sisters, our Hindu brothers and sisters have had poorer outcomes, and our Muslim brothers and sisters as well than Christian or non-religious people. It links in with some of the work that Emma Judge is doing with the Equality and Diversity team that we work with very closely. Faith and belief does seem to impact on people's outcomes and journeys. There's a strong correlation between people's spiritual lives and their positive mental health, and a big body of evidence. There's also evidence that if we're the powerful question, perhaps the best thing that any of us can ask is, what do I need to know to care for you better? And that can be a whole range of things, but it's an open question, and it can really shape the and frame things. Sometimes having that conversation around people's values, their beliefs, can really make a difference to people's outcomes, how they recover, having a good death. It's around, it can really shift how people experience their experience being in the trust. So one of the last things I'll say, and then sort of can open if there are any questions, is all of us, and we have many amazing colleagues from very different belief and faith backgrounds, we're there to be a resource to you, whether it be around sort of kind of quite often an example would be that recently theatres contacted us with a Jehovah's Witness patient and about sort of kind of sort of blood products and things like that. There are a number of different things that we can do to support your care and to make sure that we can give that best care that we possibly can. But thank you for your kind of attention, and I'll pass over and to see if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Ben and Gurdev and Sonia. That was absolutely fascinating. It was just really wonderful to hear from you all. It really struck me as somebody who is sort of stubbornly agnostic or atheist and slightly, just how much of what you said really struck a chord with things that I find important, find valuable, and the values that I think we have as a trust and that people, regardless of their belief, hold. And it was really, really interesting to hear that and to find it quite emotional to listen to. So yeah, it was just fascinating. So yeah, if anybody's got any questions, we would love to hear from you now. I have a few things, but I will wait and see if anybody else. So what I wanted to ask, especially after hearing from Sonia and hearing her journal entry, which I found really, really moving and really powerful, was just how as a chaplaincy team, how in that role you yourselves find it possible to cope with that level of sort of emotional involvement, emotional burden on it, and how that's manageable, and how as a team you support each other.
Sorry, my buttons were doing all sorts of funny things. So on a very personal level, my faith is very important to me, and as I mentioned in my journal, I start the day with morning prayer, and that in a way anchors me for the day, I think. But quite apart from that, we are very strongly encouraged to have an external supervisor. So I now meet regularly with someone who I can talk through these issues with, and reflect and discuss ways of how to support myself and cope with those very difficult situations. But of course, not least, we also have a very, very supportive team around us. It's a great blessing to work with the chaplaincy team as I do, and we're here for one another. And if something happens, there's always someone that I could talk to in the team as well. So a number of different mechanisms there.
Yeah, it's good, Dave. I spent less time than Sonia in the hospital, but whenever I'm in the hospital, when I see patients, it does get emotional sometimes because of there's nothing I could do. It's all the treatments they're having is given by the hospital, and all I could do is listen to them, hold their hand, say a little prayer, and wish them well, in the sense that they recover quickly and go home, and but in other instances, we just have to pray. Whatever fate brings, we have to accept that, and it becomes difficult when you come home sometimes, although we are trained not to take anything home, just leave everything behind there. But human beings are such that when you do come home, you do sometimes feel that I wish I could have done more for this person, but there is nothing you can do. And it does emotionally upset me sometimes, but that is life. Okay, thank you.
I just echo what Gerdev and Sonia have said, and I think looking after our well-being with our own beliefs or faiths is fundamental. And I think particularly with the time that we've all had in the health service and in our communities, my supervisor has been, though we've been doing it through the telephone, has been a lifeline. Literally, I've spoken with Martin every month, and that's been so important, particularly when time has been challenging. And I think that there are lots of good things. One advert, the room in Gledhouse is going to move because the chaplaincy is moving as part of the moves for ED. But one thing to say is we have a number across our hospitals of chapels and prayer rooms and quiet rooms, and some have very religious iconography, some don't have any iconography whatsoever. And I think sometimes that just taking quietness and time out. I'm lucky. I commute into the city. I used to live in southeast London, but I think just that watching of nature and the cycle of the years, and even going out for a walk in the rain is really, really kind of important. But there are sort of kind of different. It's finding for each of us what kind of refreshes and restores, and recognizing the our vulnerability and fragility. There are times that you are away from the bedside, moved to tears, and need to express that or talk through.
Thank you. That's really interesting. I think Stuart's got his hand up.
Thank you, and thank you to all three of you for really moving and passionate run through of the chaplaincy service, and it just made me reflect on what we do as a service together, and how we're there at the different parts in people's lives, from the beginning to the end, and all the parts in between. And we share the good stuff, we share the really emotional, hard stuff, and and it's really tough, isn't it, sometimes for people? And I wonder. I mean, first of all, thank you for the work you do, because you're there, I think, when people are at their most vulnerable. And having been in that position myself, I know how it feels at the other side of it. And knowing that there's somebody there, even just reaching out a hand and saying, I'm here to walk alongside you, as you said, is hugely important. How much do you work with staff in terms of when our nursing and medical colleagues and others are there at somebody's end of life and go through that emotional thing? Do they come to you as well? Do they ask for support, and how does that look?
Shall I pick that up? That's a really, really helpful question, and actually will encourage me to talk a little bit more, and I'll also ask Gurdev and Sonia to sort of add. We've Leeds Cares, one of the things that we have struggled with is with chaplaincy and spiritual care has always been about supporting patients and staff. But we're very aware that when things like COVID happen, our bleeps go, and it's really hard to give people sort of kind of time. So Leeds Care, Leeds Hospital Charity, has funded a post for a pastoral carer. So we obviously I can only give a broad brushstroke, but Paula's there either to work with teams or individuals to reflect on their care, but it's also in the moment. So I think it might be with the doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals on the ward. I think it's that moment with the nurses station or in the office where people are perhaps sort of going to talking about the challenges and struggles. It might be that something's very upsetting for them, and it might be about care plan, but it is that acknowledgement. I mean, I think one of the reasons that I wear a dog collar is and other colleagues wear other religious symbols. I know that can be off-putting. It's just we're a very uniformed organisation, and I think one of the things that we try and do, it's really hard with masks, is acknowledge colleagues and also it's kind of almost a bad cliche in chaplaincy circles, but we do try and loiter with intent. We are there and we are confidential, and so sometimes it will be just that 5-second check-in. Either I'm having a really tough day, or somebody just needs to tell us things, or it might be sometimes that we'll kind of find a quiet corner and go in there. So the answer is we definitely do support. We want to do more, and we've got Paula who's kind of leading more, but I think it is an area both locally and nationally that we know, because I think it's another resource alongside our excellent wellbeing team. Sort of all the good things that are offered there. It's a different type of support that can be, and again, we're all different, and it's about sort of knowing that you can either informally or formally approach us. I don't know whether Sonia or Gurdev want to say anything more.
Yeah, I don't have much connections with the staff, but when I do go in the hospital, I do hear from the staff that they would come and say thank you very much for coming in, because the family feels more at patients now than before, because they were not able to uh, talk to the family about the spiritual care, or about the religious aspects of life. And they would basically say thank you. And sometimes they will ask me some questions, which I will try to answer those questions. But uh, the only other time which I have taken part is, I think it was the Leeds and York partnership. They had a mental health issue. Where they asked me to join them as well, where we advised staff how mental health in the Sikh community is being perceived. So other than that, not very much contact with the staff, but we do liaise with them when we have to visit the hospital here.
Yeah, just to echo what Ben has said, really, the importance of acknowledgement of staff, and we try our best to always do that, whether it's for a few seconds or chat for a few minutes, or sometimes longer by arrangement. And we have been known as well to go on to wards that have had particularly difficult times, and met with groups of staff. So yeah, and part of my role as well, part of chaplaincy, which I've led on, is to be part of the welcome program for international nurses. So that's another way we input and try to make ourselves, our presence felt amongst staff. Interestingly, I have a colleague sitting on the other side of the screen with me here who started just this week, Glenda, and she did ask the question about chaplaincy input, perhaps at induction of new staff. I think that's something, a question we need to ask as well.
Thank you. That was all very interesting. I can't see any more hands up, but if anybody wants to jump in with a final question before we finish, then please do feel free to do so. But yeah, I'd just like to thank you again for joining us this morning. And Sonia, Ben and Gerda, it was just really interesting to hear from you. And I've definitely learned a lot about service, and feel like I've got a much better understanding, and also feel really grateful for everything that you do for the whole community. So yeah, I'd just like to say thank you for joining us. And I hope that we will see you again. Yeah, if anybody would like to chip in before we finish, or just offer our thanks. So we'll leave you to get on with your very busy days. And thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you for your attention. And just to say, if there's something that we can do to support your caring, or either as an individual or in your sort of directorates or where you're working in the trust, please just pick up the phone. And literally, we are available 24/7, and we'll always try and do timely response. So please, if there's something we can do to support you better, please just ask.
Just last thing from me as well. I just want to say that one other thing we do is we have a prayer day on Guru Nanak, and this year we're having it on the 18th at St. James's Hospital. But unfortunately, many people would not be able to attend, but the program will be streamed on hospital site somewhere, which I'm not sure which one, but surely staff will be made aware when it will be streamed. So if you would like to see the spiritual side of the Sikh religion, you will be able to see there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think there's a question about the quiet rooms.
yeah, Tim's just asked if they're open again.
Sorry,
Yes.
that was me.
No, definitely. So just a broad brushstroke, Chapel Allerton is brilliant because that's open 24 hours a day. The Faith Centre in Bexley is open 24 hours a day. And just to say that the Faith Centre has got no religious iconography, although it's got the title of that. At LGI, the chapel, as the chapel at St James's, is closed. They're normally about 9 to 5, 7 days a week. 7 days a week at LGI, 5 days a week at St James's. But there are other rooms across sites that we've got codes that we can give you, sort of kind of the code to get in. But the literally when I'm called in at night, Bexley is often used, and please, if you want to have a change from busy sort of kind of clinical or non-clinical environments, they're a place where you can come and be, and everybody is absolutely welcome.
Brilliant, thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Jenny's just popped a few links in the chat. Quite recently, the library worked with the Chaplaincy service to purchase a collection of books on spiritual care and pastoral care. So she's just linked to that in a catalogue if anybody's interested in exploring that more. And we've also got a bit more information about our forthcoming talking point sessions and also a feedback form for today. And I think that is everything for today. So yeah, thanks again, and I'm sure we're all extending our thanks to you for joining us. And thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you. Bye.